Well, I was born in County Wicklow, Ireland, which is a very rural part of Ireland. I was born in 1941. Ireland in the 40s and 50s was a third world country. I remember as a kid going to elementary school, we had no electricity, we had no running water. We had to go carry water from the well and, oil burning lamps for light and everything else. So it was a very challenging time. Now Ireland, of course, is the most prosperous country in Europe. But I'm in America, so I'm enjoying the American prosperity. Mm-hmm. We were poor, but we didn't know we were poor, because everybody else was, mostly, except for, large farmers or large merchants that lived in the area. So I never felt deprived, never was hungry, we always had a decent place to live, and I was born in the house that we still use. And when I go back there in the summer times, that's where I stay, in the place that I was born. So that's very special to be able to do that. My father died when I was 3, and my brother Peter, I think he was 6 at the time. And of course there was no social welfare in Ireland at that time, so my mother had to go out and work. My mother was very insistent that we both get a good education, and she made it possible by, sometimes she worked 2 and 3 jobs. And again, there was no free education in Ireland at that time too. So I rode a bike after I left elementary school. I rode a bike 5 miles into the nearest high school, which was in Tullow, 5 miles away, uphill both ways, and wind was always in my face. So, however, I endured and graduated from high school. The local parish priest at the time was Father Tom MacDonald, and he was a friend of the family, and I was impressed with him and happened to mention it to him after high school that might be interested in the priesthood. So he said, well, why don't you try the seminary? So I went, and thinking, well, I'll get this out of my system. But I didn't. Yeah, I knew exactly that I would have to come to some English-speaking country, because Ireland had too many priests at the time. And during my first year in the seminary, we used to call them recruiters, now they're called vocation directors. They would come over from the United States, and the president of the college, Dr. Patrick Lennon, he suggested that I go to Mobile-Birmingham. Now, I had no clue about Mobile-Birmingham or about the United States. There was no internet at that time that you could look up anything. So you just listened to the vocation director explaining the need that they had in the South. And so at the recommendation of Dr. Lennon, I signed up for Mobile-Birmingham. Well, I really did not know what to expect. I knew how the church worked in Ireland, but I knew it was going to be different. And I really thought it was going to be much harder than it actually turned out to be. My first assignment was at St. Mary's in Fort Walton Beach, and this was in August. And I remember getting off the plane, and it was hot. I thought the heat must have been coming from the plane, but the further I got away from the plane, the hotter it got. So that was quite a shock. Yeah, it was a culture shock. It was just like being born again, but not the charismatic sense. You had to get used to the food, you had to get used to the climate. I'll never forget my first weekend in Fort Walton Beach. It was the old St. Mary's, with a little church, and it was downtown. And there was no air conditioning. Paddy Cunningham was the pastor, and the priest wore the long black cassock that time. And I remember going out my first Saturday to hear confessions in the old church, and a little box in there. The bugs were biting me. There was a Billy Bowlegs festival going on out in the bay. There was all kinds of explosions and noises. Nobody told me what that was. I thought there was a war going on in the country. And I remember a family, the confession was at the back of the church, and a family came in, and they had a little boy, and they obviously had been warning them to be quiet when they go into the church, because Jesus was in there. And I remember he comes into the back of the church, and he looks all around him, and he turns around to his parents, and he says, "I can't see Jesus in here." And I said to myself, well, that's my sentiments exactly too. But then it kept getting better and better all the time, and I was fortunate to be down in Fort Walton, I guess, for 6 or 7 years. So pretty much I've had every assignment except that I was never a dean. But everything else, I was the chancellor, I was vicar general, filled in for archbishop when the diocese was vacant. So yeah, I've had every assignment except being dean, and I don't want that now. I was at St. Stephen's for just a couple of months, and then my first pastor assignment was Our Lady of Victory in Crestview. I think I was maybe 2.5, 3 years Our Lady. So I enjoyed it, that assignment. Also, the Funiac was a mission of Crestview at that time. So I had to drive to the Funiac Springs every Sunday morning after Mass in Crestview to say Mass, and the church in the Funiac Springs was a small building right across the courthouse, from the courthouse downtown. We had a Radio Shack PA system. It used to pick up all the truckers on the interstate, so you could be in the middle of your sermons and you'd hear breaker 19, and there was no bathroom in that church. Anyone needed to go to the bathroom, they had to go to the filling station down the block. We were on retreat in Mobile, I guess my last year in Fort Walton Beach. And the retreat was at Spring Hill College. Actually, it was Archbishop Fulton Sheen that gave that retreat, and it was announced that we were becoming part of the Diocese of Pensacola, Tallahassee. Bishop Gracida was the first bishop. Well, after I planned his installation, and I was the master of ceremonies, he was flying me back to Crestview in his Cessna 182. And he said, well, I need you to come to the cathedral. He appointed me rector of the cathedral and also his master of ceremonies. So I was at the cathedral, I think, for 4 years. Then he asked me to be his secretary, even though I couldn't type, but it wasn't that kind of secretarial work, doing his appointments, things like that. And I lived at St. Anthony's there for about 4 years. I've been in all of the parishes and missions at least 4 times. Of course, he flew an airplane and sometimes got him into a lot of trouble in terms of not showing up on time delayed because of weather and things like that. Back then all of the parishes were very welcoming for the bishop and for myself as well. So I enjoyed it. You got to see all of the parishes, and he was moved to Corpus Christi. I went to Corpus Christi with him and emceed his installation there. He wanted me to stay in Corpus Christi, but I said to him, I didn't get a letter from Rome saying to go to Corpus Christi like you did, Nat. And it was the best decision I ever made to stay here. And then I think Bishop Simons came, and I traveled with him for about 6 months. The priests were saying to him when he came here, Bishop Gracida used to fly over us. Bishop Simon said, oh no, I won't be doing that. Every time we went to Tallahassee, he would start out and he'd stop at every parish. You know, Milton would be the first one, and then Crestview, and all along the line. That worked out for, I guess, one time, but then after that, the guy in Milton would call whoever's the call along the line. Nobody was ever home. I was chancellor for him then for, I guess, for as long as he was here. But then I guess he got moved. The original offices were at St. Anthony's. St. Augustine Diocese gave the Diocese of Pensacola, Tallahassee 15,000 to get started, which wasn't very much. The diocese started growing. They moved down to St. Stephen's School. The offices were there until Bishop John Ricard built the pastoral center. So in '84 I came to St. Anne's. St. Anne's was a small parish. I think we had about 300 families here at the time. I never asked for an assignment, and I never refused an assignment. Going through the bishops, I guess they got moved before they got around to moving me. So it wasn't that I asked to stay or anything else like that. It just happened. And then I've always been involved in administration at the diocese in various capacities. So I guess that also maybe helped in my longevity here. I guess going on 41 years. You know, it was growing, and it was always exciting, growing, and I became very involved in the community and took what Pope Francis has said, you know, that the parish serves the whole community, not just the Catholics. So I got involved in the whole community, and it has been a great ride. It's always been exciting, you know. The public's shopping center, the Moultons would not have built that if we hadn't shared some property with them. The arbors wouldn't be here. So I think we helped in the development of the Gulf Breeze community, and Chamber of Commerce and the Optimist Club come, and also the high school holds many events here. So there's many community events here. The last building we did here was the actual church. Well, we built the school and the Family Life Center. And I think being involved in the community when the scandal broke was very helpful for us, because the community knew us. And also those buildings have brought people into the church, provided the things that made it easy for people to approach St. Anne's and to see that we were, you know, that we were normal human beings wanting to serve the community. So I don't think we had any people looking down on us during the times of the scandal, because they knew us. Obviously, it has grown. It has grown not so much because of me, but because of the people and the people that were involved. My approach to hiring people was to hire them around my weaknesses. The things that I was not good at doing, I would hire people that were good at doing. I think that's why the parish grew. I'm not a micromanager. I told the employees the results I wanted. I did not tell them how to get them. You know, so long as it was moral and legal, they could go at it. I think when Martha Gaynor was here, Martha was a very talented woman. She still is. And we used to have at least 100 young people in this church here on Sunday nights. And they would come from, you know, as far away as Fort Walton Beach. During her time, a lot of those young people became priests. A lot of them became, you know, religious education directors. A lot of them became youth directors. Some of the guys that are priests now, that were lying out there on the floor, and So obviously it didn't do him any harm. That's how relationships are formed. I guess when you met Grace, after a while, did you invite her out for dinner or for lunch? And that was the start of getting to know each other. That was the start of how the Lord built his relationship with the apostles. Was around food. So food is very important in building relationships. And because I realized that this is how you build community. It's easy to build a church, but it's very difficult to build community. If you build a church and there's no community, then you have pretty much wasted your time. I love people. I like to talk to people, and I like to, share a meal with people, and that's how I did it. That was the best ministry we have ever done here as a community. I had evacuated for Ivan with Seamus and Sissy and their family. We went up to Cantonment. The rectory was vacant at that time, so we stayed there. And then I guess a day or two after the storm, we came back to Gulf Breeze again, and I was sitting in the house at about. Fortunately, when we came back, we had electricity, and I was about 9:30 in the evening. I was getting ready to go to bed, and the phone rang, and it was Mayor Lane Gilchrist from. He was mayor of Gulf Breeze at the time, and he said Beverly, the Zimmerman, who became mayor later on, was a councilwoman, and she was up in Milton, and he said, we have a chance of getting a FEMA center here, but we have nowhere to put it. So would you be glad or willing to open up the Family Life Center? And I said, sure. So we did, and that was the whole staff's ministry for 4.5 months. 16,000 people came through here. They used to come here from all over. It was the best FEMA center in the area, because most of the FEMA centers in Pensacola and Fort Walton Beach were set up in warehouses where there was no air conditioning. But we had the air conditioning here, and it was great. And it's still when I go to Publix here, people will say, "Oh, Father, you go ahead of me." I say, "No, it's okay." No, he said, you were so good to us, and your parish was so good to us during Ivan. So people still remember Ivan. Well, the one thing I learned was you better pray when you're not sick, because it's very hard to pray when you are sick. I don't know what kind of medication they were giving me, but I tell you, I was out of it. I have no recollection of all the time. I guess I was 4 weeks in the hospital over here. I have no recollection of, but my mind was, I don't know what was going through my mind, but a lot of it was distressing and anxious. I have no memory of who visited, but I knew that I was being prayed for. That was the thing that kept me going. But I honestly felt that I was dying at one stage. I was really wanting to call some people, but I guess I think I did have the phone, but I wasn't capable of dialing it. But it wasn't a fearful thing, it wasn't. I was never scared, and then it was only when I got back to Seamus's and got back into the family life that I came to realize how sick I was and how much I was getting better. I think it was the prayers of the community, and the concern of the community. I don't know how long I was at Seamus's, but the whole time I was there, people were bringing meals every day, and you just felt the love of the community. I mean, people were willing to do whatever needed to be done. I've known a couple of generations in families, and being able to celebrate, the wedding of a couple that baptized and knew them when they were in preschool, and to see them doing so well and being still part of their faith, that's always a really joyful experience. Also, to visit somebody that's really sick and to give them the sacrament of the sick and really see it work, that's a powerful experience. Hearing confessions that sometimes you see a person that is really sorry, but now they're really relieved. So it's when you see a sacrament work in people, that's real joy, and it makes you realize that the sacraments are real. I do not see the confession as a place for advice, except a couple of sentences maybe. Jesus never heard confessions, but he forgave people. And so I don't think the hearing of the confession is what makes a good confession, or what the people tell you is not what makes a good confession. I think it's their desire to be forgiven. I mean, people would mention something, and I would say, I think, well, do I need clarification? Then I say to myself, no, I don't need clarification. So I would never question people in confession about what they confess. Jesus forgave them, and he didn't ask them to confess. He knew what their sins were. So I think that same Jesus, when somebody comes into confession, he knows what their sins are. And if they're contrite, then all they need is the absolution. At the beginning, you're nervous, and you're trying to get familiar with everything, and you're saying Mass, but you're not always conscious of how present Christ is in the Mass. I've never doubted his presence, but I haven't always been aware of it, and but now you ask him when you consecrate the chalice, you say, Lord, pour out your precious blood upon this whole community, and especially upon this congregation here present. So you rely more on what Christ is doing rather than what you are doing. Now you're asking me to go to confession, right? Well, every stage of your life is a different struggle. My struggles are not going to be any different than your struggles as you go through the various phases of life. You have no fear in the early years of your life, But, when you get to be my age, you have fears that you never thought you would have, The Lord has taken care of me this year, or all these years, and people say, well, what are you going to do when you retire? Well, I'm 83, so I'm not going to take up skateboarding or anything like that. I mean, the Lord has provided for something to do all of these years, and I'm sure he's going to provide for me to do something, and I think he must have something in mind for me, or I wouldn't have recovered from that COVID, really. You know, why would he go to all that bother and just have me hang around? I think they should look at who the people that God puts in their lives, allow them to, because God is using those people to help them discern their vocation, to realize that they're working with Christ. They're not working for Him, they're working with Him. So He's your partner, accomplishing whatever He wants you to accomplish. Well, I would hope that people would have good memories and that feel that I was able to help them. They were enriched by my ministry and by my presence. And early on in my priesthood, I discovered that not everybody likes you. That was a surprise. But it's true, you know. They state statistically that there's going to be 4 people against you before you ever get to the parish. So I guess to realize that that's going to happen, and that's not your fault and it's not your problem, it's theirs. But my priesthood has been very fulfilling. I've got to do things that most priests never had the opportunity to do, and I thank God for that, and I thank God for the Gulf Breeze community, and I'll still be here and will still continue to serve in any way that I can, and I think the main reason why I would like to step down now is because there's going to be 4 priests ordained for this diocese, and I don't want to deprive this community of having a young and vibrant priest here. So I just don't want to be taking up space. So, well, you know, I did not work for the bishops. I did not work for Christ. I worked with Christ. So there's a big difference if you're working with Him, and it changes your whole mindset when you're working with Him. You don't feel that it all depends on you. Also, you know, the Stations of the Cross, when you're saying the sorrowful mysteries, walking around the church there, that's very helpful. My 2 favorite stations are the 4th station and the 9th station. You know, I know there's nothing in scriptures that say what happened between Jesus and Mary at that time, but I always try to figure out what they did say. I'm sure they must have exchanged words. And then the 9th station, where you see Jesus on His knees, you know, the Creator of the whole universe brought to His knees by that cross. That's a powerful image of Christ's humility. And also the office, I think it has been a great stabilizer for me down through the years. Even though I think some of the readings they put in there, they put them in because they know nobody would read them if they weren't in there. But really the rosary is my favorite prayer. If I didn't get the rosary in a day, there was something missing in my day. My mother had us all pray the rosary every night. All 3 of us have to get down on our knees, no matter how late it was, that the rosary had to be said. I remember when I was going to high school in Tullow, riding a bicycle, I would always say the rosary every day. Mary has had a major influence on my life. One of the fathers of the church said, if you do not honor Mary, how can you honor Christ? She was the mother of Christ, so why would you ignore her? I think it has been evolving all along, it really has, especially when, the joyful mysteries, the Annunciation, that she wasn't sure of what's going on. I'm not always sure of what's going on either, but then that the Lord is going to work it out. It's hard to see God's will in the future, because when you look back over your past, you see that the people and events that He put in your life that brought you to where you are today. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for these 40 years here in the Gulf Breeze community. I thank you for all of the generations that I've had the privilege to serve, and I thank you for all of the staff that have come through here, and for all that they have helped me accomplish whatever I did. And I ask you to continue to bless Father Kerr and his staff now as he continues to grow the community. And we make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you.
All right.